We are 120 times stronger, and yet we're in month 6 of what was supposed to be a 4-day, 96-hour air campaign. If they control the strait, they can restrict the critical flow of oil coming out of the strait. It forces everyone to use the dollar as the world reserve currency. And you have no idea what's coming.
So, Pete, without further ado, let's get into this. This is a topic that everybody knows about.
Mm-hmm.
It's a topic that I wouldn't say consumes our life, but I think it's a topic that no matter what news channel you watch, they have a spin on it, some different than others. But here's the one thing. The news, in my opinion, is just giving us reports on a daily basis as to what's transpiring in the last couple of days
Sure.
or where we're potentially headed. Nobody has even attempted, in the places that I gather my news, to break it down the way you started breaking it down for me and the way we're going to do today.
Sure. Well, with respect to the media, they don't look at scenarios systemically. And so they're looking at every episode in isolation. And it precludes people from being able to get a understanding of what actually is taking place, because the circumstances are much more complex. And in a complex system, you're going to have what's referred to as emergent behaviors.
So are they trying to just simplify it because the average American doesn't have the attention span to sit down and long form break it down like we're going to?
Well, yeah, at some level, yes, there is an effort to try to perhaps dumb things down a little bit. I mean, as an aside, you have to understand 50% of the people in the United States read with a sixth grade level comprehension.
Really? 50%?
Yeah.
Wow. I think I'm in that percent.
And so you have an effort to obviously be able to boil it down to be disseminated to a wider spectrum of individuals. Also, quite frankly, a lot of people don't understand the way the American economy is structured. And if you don't understand the U.S. sovereign debt market, you're not going to be able to discern what exactly is taking place. And for your audience, this isn't me speaking now from hindsight, because in January, there was the Iranian operation is one of a forefront strategy that's currently being put in place by the American government. In January, there was an earlier operation. That's when they went and they knocked off the leader of Venezuela.
Was that the first step?
No, that was the second one. But with respect to the Venezuelan operation, that was a decapitation strike. The one in Iran, that was a decapitation strike. These are removing the leaders. Decapitation doesn't mean unaliving.
Doesn't mean cutting their head off.
It means removing the leadership so that we can install a sock puppet. And so that operation worked in Venezuela. It's failed in Iran.
Everybody knows we invaded Venezuela.
Sure.
And Trump chalked it up to the leader was this big drug person, and they were bombing all these drug boats that were coming off the coast and what have you, when realistically, it didn't have anything to do with that at all. And he's also using that same template. He's trying to, if I hear what you're saying, he's trying to implement that very same political decapitation, like you said,
Sure.
in Iran. Just
for the audience to understand, I went on a numerous law enforcement and military theme related podcasts after the operation in Venezuela. And I said then in January is essentially what we're saying now. The actions by the U.S. government, once you understand the macroeconomic structure of the American economy, it's predictable what they're doing.
Which nobody does. The only thing Americans understand is how much gas is. The average guy with a sixth grade reading level only understands that my gas is now almost $5 a gallon, and he doesn't understand like you said, the macroeconomics of our country. I don't know that I understand it. I don't know that very many people do, and that's what the root of all of this is.
Yes. At its very core, the United States government, our system is at a very fragile point. And so, not to age us, but when I was growing up, one of my favorite movies was Star Wars.
Yeah.
And the Empire built the Death Star, and it was the most powerful weapon in the universe. But there was one vulnerability that if you understand the structure of that, in that particular case, the Death Star, you could destroy it. Well, we have that same vulnerability, and that's the sovereign debt market. That's our Achilles heel.
So you're saying as a country,
As a
our
country, we are
Achilles heel
subject
is the sovereign debt.
Yes.
And most people probably watching this, Pete, have no idea what that is.
That's why we are now in month 6 of what was supposed to be a 4-day, 96-hour air campaign in Iran, because they have threatened our economy by attacking the sovereign debt market. But the tool they're using is the Strait of Hormuz. If they control the strait, they can restrict the critical flow of oil coming out of the strait. Well, if you restrict the strait's oil, now you're going to undermine the American GDP. You're going to cause mass inflation. You're going to set off a whole series of negative consequences, cascades. Well, the same tool that Iran is using today, and they've got 3 of them. They haven't played the other 2 cards. We'll discuss that in a little bit.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they're softballing still.
Hold on. So here we think, and we're told, let me just see if I get this right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the average American, we'll just say me, the average dude that rolls around here, we're thinking we got them down. They're almost out. You know, they're I think today Trump said that their inflation was 3,000%, and they're in dire straits. They're almost done. That's not the case.
Well, that's true, but you're evaluating metrics that are irrelevant. See, the problem that we have, and at its core, this is a fundamental problem that's been going on now for decades, is that in the U.S., we perceive the best and the brightest being guys that are generally men who advise the president, and they have essentially the same pedigree. Harvard MBAs, Yale Law School, advanced degrees in public policy from Stanford or from Georgetown. These are all very intelligent men, high IQs, highly educated. Now take all those men, take any of them, put them in a knife fight in a back alley in Guadalajara. That Yale law degree doesn't mean a damn thing in a knife fight. Well, when you find yourself in a circumstance with a man, a functionally illiterate Mexican who's been knife fighting since he was 14, you don't talk to the guy with the Harvard MBA. He can't anticipate how that man's going to react. It's just an entirely different mindset. And so the problem that we find ourselves in is that the president, and I'm not trying to absolve Trump of any responsibility. He's the president. He makes the call. But the quality of a leader's decision-making is influenced by the quality of the advice he receives. And if he's receiving advice from individuals who are not competent to provide that advice, then the decision is going to be flawed. And we end up in a circumstance that we're in now. We spend $1 trillion a year on our military. Iran spends $8 billion. They spend less than 1% on their military than we do. We are 120 times stronger. And yet we're in month 6 of what was supposed to be a 4-day, 96-hour air campaign. Why? Because our president, and again, while I'm not some Republican and I'm not a Trump apologist, the fact of the matter remains is he's our president. We can't afford to lose this war.
Regardless of who's
in charge. Our economy is destroyed. And it will be a catastrophe for the United States on a magnitude we have never experienced before. It will destroy our standard of living.
So hold on. If we lose,
yes,
it's going to catastrophically
affect
us more than anything we've ever seen, more than the depression of the 30s.
It will launch a depression. 2024 was the first time in U.S. history that the amount of money the government spent on paying off on the interest on the national debt exceeded the amount of money we spent on the military.
Now, is that the beginning of the shit show?
That is one of the contributing factors, because when the administration came into office in January 25, they had a plan. And these were the circumstances they had to contend with. They had, for the first time, debt service exceeding national military expenditures. On top of that, you had $8 to $10 trillion worth of debt that had to be rolled over. Well, those 5-year bonds that are getting rolled over, when they were initially issued, interest rates back in the middle of the pandemic were 0 or 0.5%. It's very small. Right. Well, now interest rates are at 4%. Well, we cannot afford to issue long-term bonds at a high interest rate when your national debt is $40 trillion. So we had to do several things at one time. The U.S. government issues bonds to pay for the services and the operations of the U.S. government. And so this year, for instance, we're going to run a $2 trillion deficit. The government is spending $7 trillion, but they're only taking in $5 trillion in tax receipts. So they have to cover that differential. Those $2 trillion. So they have to issue bonds.
Are those the bonds they sell to other countries?
Well, anybody. There's a lot of domestic purchases, but a lot of foreign purchases also. And so now the people that buy, so it is in our interest to incentivize other countries to buy our bonds, because if there's a lot of demand, you're going to be able to have a smaller interest rate. So we're going to be able to export our inflation, get low financing. We have our standard of living because of dollar hegemony, because the dollar is the world reserve currency.
It's called dollar what?
Hegemony.
Dollar hegemony.
Hegemony, yes, because we're a hegemonic power.
Okay.
So
that's what our whole economical.
It was up until 25.
Okay, hold on.
Well, we are still dollar hegemony. Up until 25, it was liberal hegemony, where we were part of what we refer to as the rules-based international order. We created the rules, therefore it benefited us, so we enforced the rules. We didn't enforce them against ourselves, but we enforced the rules on everybody else. And that pretense has gone away, because for our system to work, people have to buy our debt.
Bonds.
Sure, our bonds. And so now we are incentivized to encourage people to come to our markets. Now, when we were the only game in town, we can afford to be magnanimous, pretend like we cared. We cared about democracy. We cared about the women in Iran. We cared about the schoolgirls going to school in Afghanistan. All bullshit. Now that there's an alternative, parallel financial architecture being built by China, and it's begun siphoning off the demand for our bonds, we got a problem. Because the U.S. economy is essentially, it has the characteristics of what is effectively a Ponzi scheme. And in a Ponzi, and I did time with guys that ran Ponzi's, a Ponzi will collapse unless you have new money coming into the system. You constantly have that, just the economic activity is the core. Well, the United States government needs all this money to keep coming into...
Which is the bond market.
Sure, because up from 1945 to 1971, after World War II, we had a system called Bretton Woods. And that was the U.S. dollar was backed by gold.
Right, and didn't Nixon take us off the gold
Sure.
standard?
And so for that time period initially, the dollars... You've been to Las Vegas, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't been to Vegas in some time, but back when we were younger, I used to go to Vegas quite a bit. And if you wanted to get casino chips, you took your money, took it to the cashier, dropped off 60 grand, and they gave you 60 grand in chips.
Yep.
Well, those chips are legal tender within that resort. So if you want to go leave the tables and go buy a suit at the Versace store, no problem, they'll take it.
Or you want to buy a cheeseburger.
If your girlfriend talks you into buying her a tennis bracelet, the jewelry store will take their chips. Sure. A Ferrari, they'll take the chips. Right. When you leave that casino, those chips are no longer valuable. They're no longer legal tender. And so you have to go back to the cashier, give them the chips, get back your money. Well, in the American system, the dollars were the equivalent of the chips. The money was the gold, because you could take your money, turn it in for gold. And so we persuaded the world to say, hey, look, we're going to hold the gold and we're going to print the money. We're going to issue the chips. But each of those chips, each of our dollars are going to be backed by gold, and you can turn them in and claim your gold. That's why the dollar was good as gold.
I never knew of that expression.
Yes. And so now for the first 2 decades, nobody called us on it. Remember, in the aftermath of World War II, Europe was destroyed. They needed American financing, American construction companies, and quite frankly, they had the threat of the Soviets coming in. So they were operating under a defense architecture created by the United States. And so for the first decade, we were printing money backed by gold. Throughout the 40s, 50s, into the 60s, things went off the rail with the Vietnam War. And so the U.S. government started printing money that we didn't have the gold to back it. Now, so long as nobody's asked for an audit, You can run this racket. And so it wasn't until, I believe it was 1968, and it was the French who were the ones who called bullshit.
Really?
Because they're like, you guys are printing an awful lot of money. We don't think you've got enough gold.
So in 68,
Some late 60s,
France.
France said, you know what? Let us audit the gold.
And what gave them standing to even, I guess they did.
Because remember, their dollars.
Oh, that's right. They're buying bonds.
Their dollars, plus all their investment in our bond market is supposed to be backed by the collateral. They're simply saying, let's just make sure the collateral's there.
If we're going to buy X amount of dollars of U.S. bonds, we want to know that you're
already holding X amount of dollars. You're making these claims. It's not that we don't trust you. It's just we want to verify. Sure. Like if you tell me there's a couple $100,000 in your safe and I give you an IOU and I agree to an IOU from you, well, it's based on your representations. The money's in the safe. Well, we can keep doing these transactions and I can keep taking IOUs, but at some point I'm going to say, hey, let's go count the money.
And someday you're going to say, Bubba, I need to look at that. I need to see inside.
Let's just go make sure everything's on the up and up. Right. And if you don't let me look in the safe, what am I supposed to think? You don't got the money.
Exactly. You're not going to think good.
Exactly. So that's a reason.
And if I didn't have anything, and if I didn't have anything to hide, I'd be like, Pete, here, let me show you.
Well, we've had this conversation, remember during the campaign, Mr. Trump said repeatedly, as soon as I get into office, we're going to audit the gold held by the United States government.
Well, yeah, the Fort Knox, he was going to audit Fort Knox.
We haven't had the audit yet. You'll understand why this becomes an issue, actually.
Okay.
Because you've got the Bretton Woods system. The French call bullshit. Said, hey, let us go audit the gold. Uncle Sam, of course, says, no. You can't audit the gold. Take our word for it. And they're like, no. Better yet, you know what? Why don't you just take back your dollars and give us the gold? And so now, of course, Uncle Sam.
Calling their marker out almost.
Yeah, they're like,
right?
of course, we break out the, mon ami, we're friends, we helped you. And they're like, yeah, we appreciate what you did in World War II, and you did a great job, and we love you guys.
We bailed you out.
We want our gold.
When Hitler was up your ass, we came and helped you. We probably used all that, right?
Yeah, so then we had now at that point, we're the bank or we're the casino. If we don't honor the chips.
That'd be like you having 10,000 of chips. You go to the cage.
And they don't have the money.
So what happens at that point?
You're going to have a stampede. Everybody's going to run to get their money. And so the French said, you know what? We'll take our money. We had to give them the money. But that is what set in motion the chain of events that culminated 3 years later or 4 years later with Nixon. Because once they pulled their money, other countries were like, hey, what's going on? What do they know that we don't know?
So when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 72.
Yes, August of 71, and he temporarily closed.
Right.
It's been 55 years. It's still temporarily closed.
Why wasn't there a mad stampede?
They didn't have enough gold to cover all of the dollars they had printed.
Yeah,
Uncle Sam was running a massive counterfeiting operation, essentially.
Or a Ponzi scheme, as you would say.
Well, this wasn't a Ponzi. This was just straight counterfeiting because they have X number of gold, and they're just printing extra dollars.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, those dollars are not backed by anything.
Other than the promise that the U.S. government is going to extract that money from the American taxpayers. But right. The basis of it, the system was that it was backed by gold. There wasn't enough gold. We got caught printing money. Essentially what we did is defaulted. The government doesn't like to admit that we defaulted, but we defaulted on our debt.
So since August of 71, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, basically, we've not been compliant since.
That's why when other countries say, well, the U.S. is complaining, you're not following the rules. They're like, oh, you defaulted. We'll follow the rules when you go back to gold and we can get our gold. From 71, you got off the gold standard. The Nixon administration came up with two very clever solutions to salvage the situation. With respect to the dollar, we had to make the dollar the currency that all countries use. And it can't simply be because we're promising to pay you back. Because we'd just gotten caught running a massive counterfeiting operation, and we had defaulted on the debt because we owed everybody that had our dollars gold, and we didn't have the gold to cover. So at that point, our credibility was kind of shot. If you go bankrupt, you're not going to be able to go to a bank the next week and get a loan. They're like, hey, pal.
7 years.
Yeah, you're going to have to. So we were in essentially a jackpot because we'd gotten caught and we didn't have a reason for countries that weren't our vassals. Western Europe were essentially vassal states, but other countries didn't have to play ball. And they had an alternative. They had countries that were neutral, and you had the Cold War going on. You had the Soviet Empire at the time. And so to persuade all countries to stay with our dollar, since it was no longer good as gold, we went and we talked to our allies in the Middle East and said, look, if you guys agree to price all your oil and commodities in dollars, we will protect you. Remember, these are all dictatorships. Right. We call them sheiks. We call them, the tribal leaders,
Shah.
Whatever, the Shah, like our two big.
Yeah, the sheik and the Shah.
This is what became known as the petrodollar. And so now, if oil is priced in dollars, oil is a critical input that every country needs. So we went to our big ally in the Middle East, Iran, because Iran was our ally. Remember, in 1953, the United States government, working with the British, toppled the democratically elected leader in Iran. See, we like democracy so long as our guy wins. So when you say, like, you hear people at the administration say, we've been at war with Iran for 47 years.
No.
They're like, no, you started this in 53 when you knocked off our president and put in your dictator.
Right.
Your sock puppet, the Shah. In 1979, it was the Iranian people kicking out the American dictator.
And then we had to bring the Shah over here on some emergency surgery gimmick, right?
That was he was
going to get
he had
cancer.
Assassinated. He needed treatment. And that's when they were like, hey, return him to us. We're going to prosecute him. We didn't want to do it. Then they took our hostages. Before that, back in 73, when we had our sock puppet, he, along with the leadership in Saudi Arabia.
You've been there since we put him in place in 53.
Yeah. So then at this point, we had our two sock puppets, essentially. They agreed they're going to price oil only in dollars. So suddenly you were able to have a structural anchor. The dollar had substance. Oil.
Yeah, almost backed by oil more so than gold.
It is backed by oil. Now, the reason why it's important is because every country has to buy oil. That meant every country had to have dollars. And so when you have dollars, you can do one of two things. You can put them under your mattress, right? Or you can buy into American capital markets.
Invest into that dollar.
You can either buy American treasuries, or you can put your money into our capital markets. The S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, it don't matter.
But you're doing it in American dollars.
You're doing it in American dollars, and you're investing that money. It's called recycling. So you're taking that money, and you're putting it into the American capital system. So that gives us a tremendous amount of power because we control the plumbing. See, the treasuries are essentially a ledger. So when South Africa wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, it comes through New York. Because South Africa has the money in U.S. treasuries, and they'll say, hey, we need to transfer $200 million of ours to Saudi Arabia. Well, it's just a big ledger in New York. So we control the plumbing. You're able to tax everybody, take a little piece of the action.
Get a little VIG
on it.
You
get a little bit of VIG on the action, but more importantly, you're going to force everybody to use dollars. This is where the Fed's like...
Which strengthens the U.S. dollar.
Well,
now the dollar's backed by...
It forces everyone to use the dollar as the world reserve currency. And now to make sure that they take those dollars and not put them under the mattress, the Fed and the U.S. government deliberately introduce inflation. Because by inflating the currency, the money that's being held in Nigeria or South Africa or in Brazil, those dollars are going to lose purchasing power. So if you have, and the target is 2%.
Is that what the U.S. target is?
Target is, yeah.
Is that when everything's running smoothly? Is
sure. Yeah, we haven't hit that number in years.
When's the last time we were at
It's been years since the Feds did that.
When you say years, do you mean?
I'm talking at least 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And they've essentially just given up.
What are we at currently?
We're at well over 3.
Well over 3.
Yeah.
The sweet spot's 2.
2. Because this is what they call price stability. So if you have 2% inflation every year, that the countries that are holding the money are losing 2% worth of purchasing power every year. So now they're saying, you know what? Well, my money sitting under the safe or under the mattress is going to lose value. Let's just go buy American bonds because we're going to get 4% from the Americans. That'll offset the 2% inflation, and you're making a little bit of money.
We're still up 2.
Because of the oil, they're forced to hold dollars, and because of the inflation, they're incentivized to put the money into our markets.
See, people have no idea how this shell game runs.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe some people do, but I didn't.
It's a beautiful racket.
It is.
It's beautiful.
It's a straight racket.
Yeah. It's
And they're all in on it, aren't they, Pete? I mean, every president has to be. I mean, whether you're Republican or Democrat,
sure,
you got to play that game.
This is the basis of American power.
I mean, this is the basis of our existence.
This is the basis of our power. Because now we can control the flow of the money. We can put sanctions on countries. We can confiscate their assets. We confiscated Iran's assets. We confiscated Venezuela's assets. We confiscated Russia's assets because we're holding all the money. So you now have power and insight into everyone's business because you know where all the money's going because you have the books. So it's
you're like you said, you're the ledger.
You're the ledger. That was the solution that Nixon came up with. Back in with oil after we got off the gold standard and create this mechanism where everybody's incentivized to put the money in.
Bonds.
So long as there's no competition, we're good. They have no alternative but to take their money and put it in the American capital markets. Now, from 1973 to today, from 1973 up until where things started going off the rails was Mr. Obama. But the other important part of it is not only did they come up with this petrodollar scheme, but the Nixon administration also had their famous move where they opened up the relationships with China.
That's right. Nixon was
the one who went to China.
When the one of the few at that time
first
to go to China.
First, that's what established the relationship with China, and we ultimately kicked the Chinese that are living in Taiwan to the curb and formalized the relationship with the Chinese living in Beijing. They viewed China as the manufacturing hub of the world. You had in a poor country with a lot of workers.
A lot of labor.
Because
cheap labor.
When you're the United States and you're the world reserve currency, our biggest export is dollars. We have to have a reason to supply everybody with dollars because they have to use our dollars. We're just not going to send money to South Africa or Nigeria or Brazil or Norway. So we have an extraordinary privilege in that we print money, our paper, our casino chips, and other people give us real stuff.
For
our paper.
For our worthless paper.
And so we're doing business with, okay, what do you have? Brazil. Okay, we're going to buy this, take our paper. South Africa, take our paper. Well, if you're going to have the world reserve currency, you can't be the world's largest manufacturing company. You have to move that offshore.
Because you have to have something to spend.
To spend our papers on.
You have to have something to show for your paper.
That's
a tangible product.
Because now
object.
we're going to profit. We're going to benefit. What do you have? You have natural resources? Okay, we'll trade our paper for your natural resources or for our manufacturing goods. For your manufacturing goods, for our paper, we'll sell you services. We'll handle the banking, we'll handle the legal, we'll handle the accounting. You guys make the T-shirts, you guys make the shoes, you guys make the laptops. And
the cars.
Well, what started out as a great idea in the 70s has kind of gone off the rails now.
Well, it's gone off the rails now. The stronger China
and the because weaker, they moved up the value chain.
Now, Pete, would it be safe to say, to get off a little bit of the beaten path, would it be safe to say that China did it right and we fucked it up with regards to who is really in the driver's seat and our financial instability and just, like you said, we're on the verge of it collapsing?
It's just a profound miscalculation. It's not that somebody was right or someone was wrong. It's the system worked the way it was supposed to work. Unfortunately, they didn't anticipate the fragile nature of the system as it grew and grew and grew. Part of the problem that we have with respect to Iran is, again, going back to the presidential advisors. You heard men saying they're making a calculation that they wouldn't dare do something because we're so big or we're so strong. They wouldn't retaliate. They wouldn't attack our bases in the Gulf. They wouldn't attack our allies. They wouldn't dare take the Strait of Hormuz. Well, this is they're in a fight for their life. That's an existential circumstance. You put them with their back up against the wall. So when you put your adversary who's in an existential conflict with their back up against the wall, they have nothing left to lose.
And what you said earlier amazes me. Maybe we get down that path right now or not. But you said they have it's a 3-part series.
Oh, yes.
They've only lost one.
Well, part of the miscalculation is our advisors. And again, I'm not trying to absolve Trump, but I don't believe for a moment, and there's been no reporting other than J.D. Vance said, don't do it. He's the only one who said flat out, do not do this.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yes.
So J.D. Vance went on record and said, do not
do this.
What we did.
Yes. It's, behind closed doors, but it's been reported heavily and most recently in a famous book.
Really?
Sure. J.D. Vance is the only one with a lick of sense with respect to
this situation,
these type of situations.
Right.
If it's a debate about monetary policy at the Fed, listen to the guy with an economics degree from Harvard. Or if you need to have the proper interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, listen to the guy with the Yale Law degree. Knife fight in a back alley in Guadalajara, don't listen to those men.
Not those guys.
The problem we have is men of that nature, they believe that strength and size,
reputation,
and power or reputation intimidate other men. Well, what they're doing is they're projecting their insecurities and their weakness. Because men, particularly men with balls, they don't give a shit what your size is. And so our problem is we have people advising our president that they wouldn't dare do this, that, or the other, not realizing it's an existential conflict with an adversary who has nothing left to lose. And here in the United States, we have what is perceived as the best and the brightest, being, i.e., Yale Law, Harvard MBA, the men surrounding our president today, and every other president going back decades.
All the cabinet members.
Iran, like China, are engineering societies. We think Iran is crazy mullahs and, crazy Muslims doing whatever the hell they're doing. No, they produce engineers. China produces engineers. China produces, in 1 year, more engineers than the United States produces in over a decade.
Hold on. So in 1 year, China produces more engineers than we do in 10.
In over 10.
Wow.
Their president, Xi Jinping, he's an engineer. 80% of the Politburo are engineers. Engineers do not think in legalistic terms. Our leaders are being advised by men who are essentially reductionists, which are lawyers. They're going to simplify things to get a understanding of the facts, and then they confuse things. When the company gets caught dumping toxic chemicals into the local river, the attorney representing him doesn't go into court and tell the truth. He's got to camouflage. He's got to create smoke screens. He's got to distract. He's a musician. Look over here. Don't look over here.
And that's what lawyers do.
That's what lawyers do. When the congressman gets caught in a hotel room with a duffel bag of cash, some hookers, and some blow,
he goes to rehab.
He goes to the attorney. The attorney's like, "Oh no, pay attention over here."
And that's who we're being ran by.
That's the kind of mentality that we have. We look at it as a chessboard. Can we take pieces? Can we form alliances? Engineers don't look at that. They look at it like a circuit board.
So
what transistor can they remove to collapse the entire structure? It's called a single point of failure. If you can identify a single point of failure, you can cripple your adversary. It don't matter how big he is. So in Iran, in anticipation of this war, remember, they've been preparing for this war for 24 years.
Hold on. Go ahead and say and break that down a little bit. The average person doesn't know that.
On 9/11, we were attacked by the radical aspect of the Sunni side of Islam. Not all Sunnis, of course, are part of this, but the more radical ones, that's where they came from. Those are Iran's enemies. So after 9/11, Iran helped us. For that first year, it was in their interest to crush the Al-Qaeda guys because they posed a threat to them. The enemy of my enemy concept. Well, a year after they were helping, Bush gave his speech where he lumped them into the axis of evil. They're like, what are you talking about? We had nothing to do with that fucking shit in New York. We're actually helping you. Well, in 2002, they get lumped into the axis of evil. 6 months later, we invade Iraq. And so we were able to topple the regime in 6 weeks. Well, at that point, the Iranian leadership knew that if the United States chose to go into Iran, they couldn't survive that attack.
That's 03, 02.
03.
03.
Because we invaded Iraq in March of 03. And the regime was over with by May, because on May 4th or May 5th, something like right around that time period.
So Iran's saying, okay, we see how this works out.
We see how this works out. So they say, bring in the best and the brightest. They don't bring in their lawyers.
No, they bring in the engineers.
They bring in the engineers.
So since 2003.
They've been preparing for this fight.
Really?
Yes.
Nobody knows that.
That's why the engineers said, okay, well, how do we negate their power? We have every technological advantage. Remember, they spend less than 1% of what we spend.
Well, like they say, they'll have a $30,000 drone and we have to blow off a $1 million missile.
Those are 4 to 6 million every interceptor.
Yeah, so $4 to $6 million missiles to blow up their $30,000 drone.
The math ain't mathing.
That's happening, isn't it? I mean, that's part of why we're in trouble.
Because they have engineers. And they said, how do we negate the American advantage? Well, the United States spent 2 decades and $2 to $3 trillion fighting illiterate goat herders in Afghanistan.
2 or 3 trillion in 10 years?
In 20 years.
In 20 years.
So when we invade Afghanistan, the flag of the illiterate goat herders flying over every flagpole in that shit whole country. We spent 2 decades there, $2 to $3 trillion. We didn't lose a battle, yet we lost the war.
I was getting ready to say, and we didn't win that motherfucker.
Because today the flag of the illiterate goat herders is still flying over every flagpole in that shit whole country. How did they beat us?
Terrain.
Because they were able to fight in their mountains. So the engineers are saying, the illiterate goat herders in Afghanistan were able to defeat the Americans by fighting in their mountains because the mountains negate our technological advantage. Like I said, one of my best friends was served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, numerous special forces-led air assaults. He said they were dropping into ambushes all the time. I'm like, how's this possible? Like, we have spy satellites in space that can read a license plate on the 405 freeway in LA. How are you not picking up where these guys are at? We have drones that are constant surveillance. I'm like, when they're moving their equipment, how are you not? Our drones have thermal heat imaging capabilities. So I'm like, how are you not picking up the heat signatures when they're moving their equipment? Like, you got to pick up the fucking trucks or something. He's like, no, bro. When they're up in the mountains, they don't use vehicles. They use donkeys. The most powerful military in the history of the world spent 2 decades and $2 to $3 trillion fighting illiterate goat herders armed with AK-47s and donkeys. And we couldn't win.
And we got our ass kicked.
We didn't lose a battle. We lost the war. Why? Not because of the military, because the people that create the policies to give the president their options went to Harvard Law School.
We lost so badly, Pete, didn't we leave almost all of our military shit over
Yeah,
there?
that was a debacle.
I mean, like...
Yeah, that was just a debacle on every level. But the point being is, you don't look at it from the result. You look at it what they were planning on the front end. So when your adversary is analyzing, well, they were able to win. Why? Because they fought in the mountains. Last year, the American government got into a military action against the Houthis in Yemen. These were illiterate goat herders. Well, we were going to show them because the guys that go to Harvard and Yale seem to think that people are intimidated by size. So we flew a couple of aircraft carrier battle groups into the Red Sea. Were the Houthis afraid? Were they scared? No. You know what they started doing? Shooting missiles at our boats. They damn near sank one of our $13 billion carriers. Now, why couldn't we defeat the Houthis? Fighting in our mountains. Illiterate goat herders in Yemen, illiterate goat herders in Afghanistan neutralize the technological superiority by capitalizing on their terrain. The first full year of the Sinaloa cartel's existence as a standalone entity was 1990. For 35 years, the American government has targeted this collection of organizations led by functionally illiterate men with 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade educations. The U.S. government has spent hundreds of billions of dollars over the course of the past 3 decades targeting these functionally illiterate Mexicans. CIA, NSA, FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, you name it.
ATF.
Everybody and their mom. 35 years later, the functionally illiterate Mexicans are still here. Why? They're fighting in their mountains. Illiterate goat herder in Afghanistan, illiterate goat herder in Yemen, functionally illiterate Mexican, it don't matter. If they're fighting in their mountains, they have the advantage. Iran is a mountainous country.
Very.
And so when they called in the engineers, they said, how do we negate their advantage? This is what they refer to as the mosaic strategy. And they built it over the course of the last 2 decades. But they started studying. Well, we have to take advantage of our geography. Since Saddam's regime fell, when they took out the leadership in Iran, they created what's called the mosaic defense, where they broke up the country into 31 different provinces. And each of the military commandos for those provinces have their set orders. They operate independent. So in the event of a leadership strike, and it's already all pre-planned, in the event of a decapitation strike that actually happened, where you take out the
Like we did in Venezuela.
leadership, in Yuan, took out the supreme leader, took out a lot of the top brass at their military. They already have a pre-plan. So like on every odd day, province 1, 6, 9, 15, 32, fire your missiles at these targets. Every even day, alternate ones. On every prime day, 1, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, you guys fire. You just change it up. Boom, 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 boom. It's just all on operation. So you can't decapitate the government now.
Right. If you do,
it doesn't matter. They insulated their ability to survive a decapitation strike.
Here's the thing, Pete. We miscalculated all of that.
Oh, because we have lawyers. See, the boys from Harvard Law and Yale Law aren't smart enough to outsmart the Iranian engineers any more than they were with the Chinese engineers. And we're going to get to that in a minute. And so when they say, hey, how are we going to defend? First of all, let's take advantage of our geography. Secondly, break up the leadership structure into 31 independent operators. They're cells. It's essentially the Sinaloa cartel model. Each is a standalone entity. There's no leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Chapo Guzman was never in charge of anything other than his own organization, which was one of 40, 50, or 60 organizations.
Which is just a cell at that point.
Well, the Iranian government, their military, has essentially adopted that same framework. That way, if you take off this cell, if province number 3 gets knocked off, it doesn't affect anybody else.
Providence 7 and 9 are great.
Everybody's still operating.
And still have their people in command.
And so that way,
and their marching
geography
orders.
And the fusion of command.
Well, and the fact that we had no idea this shit was happening. Meaning our lawyers and the cabinet members and people that they didn't have any idea, probably.
No, not that they didn't have any idea, is that they underestimated their adversary. Once they create their mountain strategy, the engineers literally, they built their facilities underground. So there are entire missile building cities underground. We can bomb all we want. Can't get them.
Don't know where they're at.
No, not only are they hidden, but they're structures that can withstand artillery and the bombings.
And we can't see them.
And so then you have drone building facilities, missile building facilities. The missile launchers are built into the mountain. Like literally all of a sudden the mountain will open up, whoop, shoot the missile out, close it. Whoop. And you've got tons of these because a lot of them are firing decoys. And so now you have this enormous mountainous terrain, concealed missile launchers, concealed drone launch sites, everything subterranean. Now, the reason why this is important is because the U.S. government has such an expensive military. Like if you mentioned earlier, our interceptors are what's called the PAC-3s, the Patriots. They cost $4 to $6 million an interceptor. And when there's an incoming missile, you got to shoot 2 or 3 of them per missile. So when this thing started, for those first few weeks, you hear people like, at the beginning, Iran was sending 1,000 missiles a day. Look how many they dropped off. What they were doing was clearing the armory from the 1980s and 1990s stock. They sent all their garbage. We're squandering our $4 to $6 million interceptors, knocking down rockets from 1992. They tricked us into using up our weaponry.
For real?
Of course.
For real.
That's why they were firing 1,000 rockets a day. Send out the 1990s. I forgot the stuff from 91.
Yeah, because the new 2026...
Well, they haven't used the hypersonics yet.
They've got
the Rushnik from Russia. We haven't seen the serious stuff yet.
We haven't?
No.
For real?
The Iranian engineers put together this plan. We have not seen their hypersonic missiles. They have second and third and fourth generation.
So we've seen their junk.
They use their junk
to get all of our good shit.
To get our good shit to get popped off. Then they came in and just started destroying all our bases. Boom, 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 boom. And so as you can see from the image, all those little red spots indicated all the bases that we had that we believed were containing Iran. Well, this is the mindset of the individual who believes that size is intimidation. In reality, we gave them targets because their missiles can't hit us. But by putting the bases near them, now they can destroy us.
Now they have a target.
Now they have targets. And so they send up all their 1990s era rockets to get us to fire off our expensive interceptors. And then now that's just free clear, just unobstructed shots. Boom, boom.
In your estimation, Pete, what do they got left?
They have their most powerful missiles that they haven't used. They haven't used their hypersonics yet. And keep in mind, they're building around the clock.
Oh, yeah, they're all hands on deck.
They're all hands on deck. It's a full, remember, because each one of the provinces has their own missile cities.
So probably since, now do you think they started kind of gearing up when we fucked with Venezuela? Do you think that they knew they were next?
Of course. They've had, since at least from the time that Trump tore up the agreement that Obama entered into with Iran back in 2018 with respect to the nuclear program, they've been ready for war. I mean, they've been preparing, but from that point forward, they knew something was coming.
Like as we speak today, and as this podcast drops, they're making bombs.
They have continuously been making missiles. Because another miscalculation we made was that our boys, our Harvard men thought we were going to war with Iran. We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran, Russia, and China.
Maybe start with Venezuela.
Well, remember, we had the dollar-denominated financial order that is now based on the petrodollar.
Our whole dollar system is based on the petrodollar.
Okay, and which creates the mechanism to have the world reserve currency, the world reserve asset. Everything was fine up until, realistically, the great financial crisis in 2008. Because with respect to the GFC, prior to that, there had been numerous other financial crises throughout the world. We bailed out Mexico in the 90s, the Asian tigers, the Russia situation. There's all these circumstances where whenever these type of events occurred, the U.S. working with the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, they come in, they're going to give them a cash infusion, and we're going to insist upon certain reforms. You're going to change your political leadership. You're going to change this structure with respect to your financial industry. You're going to begin to privatize. So, for instance, if you have a national mining company that's responsible for your copper mines, well, you got to sell that to American interests or to British interests or to our friends in Europe.
So we dabbled all throughout the world.
Right, creating these salvage, these they were bailout packages. Well, when we had our blow up, we didn't follow any of those own restrictions. We refused to impose austerity. And so from that point forward, and of course, we bailed out the banking system.
And bailed out the car manufacturers.
And so that was pennies. It was multiple $1 trillion for the banking system.
Was 2008, Pete, way worse than people even imagine? I mean, with regards to how sketchy and how much of a tipping point it was, could have been even worse.
The free market conservatives that were then claiming to be in power engaged in socialistic practices that make Mamdani look like Milton Friedman. Just a complete bailout of the financial system. Trillions of dollars got pumped in. They bailed out foreign banks. And so they stopped what was going to be a massive catastrophe. It was bad. Could have been a lot worse. And so that put other countries on notice that the people that are responsible for the rules-based international order, they don't follow the rules themselves. And if they're going to engage in such fiscally irresponsible practices, why am I going to have them holding my money? So by 2010, 2011, people are like, they're suspect. This is where you started seeing, like, for instance, in the narco world, the money laundering pivoted away from American markets. You had a concerted effort to start moving into real world assets. And so now you had guys buying, beachfront property in Uruguay or luxury eco tourist hotels in Ecuador. Or
with the cartel money.
Yeah, upscale boutiques in Rio.
Prior to that,
a lot of the money was just coming into the American market. Right. With all that money printing, you're essentially debasing the dollar. And so you're losing your purchasing power. The rest of the world began watching this massive money printing with debasement of the value of the dollar. That's why you see things are so much more expensive, is because the more money you keep printing, the less purchasing power your dollar has. It's not that prices are going up. It's just that your dollar is getting that much devalued. It's that much weaker. And so in 2012, you had an issue where, I believe it was 2012, where Mr. Obama kicked Iran out of the financial system. There's a network called SWIFT.
SWIFT?
And this
I've heard of it.
And this is the
network. Like when you send money to, sometimes you'll have a SWIFT number.
That's right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so that's the plumbing for all this moving of money.
So that's like where you can move money internationally would be a SWIFT number.
Yes. So whether it's, again, the South
So
Africans
the SWIFT
buying
system.
oil from Saudi Arabia, where that money's going to, those transactions are going through SWIFT using our ledger in New York.
And we determine, I guess, we probably at that point determine who's in SWIFT and who's
That's
not.
right. So we expelled Iran from the SWIFT system, which...
Why did we do that?
Because we were trying to create leverage to force them to negotiate on their nuclear program.
And they didn't give a fuck.
Well, they ultimately ended up making the agreement with Obama, several years later.
What was that? Now you said Trump ripped up the Obama deal. What was the Obama deal, essentially?
The Obama deal was Iran was limited to enriching uranium up to the internationally accepted standard. Like every country has the right to enrich up to about 3.75.
3.75%
purity level. The weapons grade is 90%. So you can keep it at 3.75%. That's for nuclear energy for your power plants. You have a second subsection which allows it to go up to 20% for like medical isotopes. And so you have to declare.
But in order to hurt people via a bomb, you got to be at
90%. Yeah.
So Iran, they signed that deal all day. They're like, okay, we can go to 3.75.
It was a 3.75, but it was under international inspection. So you had actual auditors there to make sure that they stayed at the 3.75. And so, and that worked out for the first 3 years. And Trump came into office and he said, no, we're going to get a better deal.
Why couldn't it be good with that deal?
Because there was a sunset provision at the end of 10 years. Iran was going to lose a lot of the restrictions.
Like 2022.
And so they're saying, hey, look, there's a sunset clause. We're going to get a better deal. So he tears up the Obama deal and he puts in what he calls maximum pressure. And so Obama had already originally kicked them out of SWIFT. Well, for a country, that's normally the equivalent of a death penalty because you're not going to be able to engage in international business.
Right. Even I know, I mean, like I've wired money abroad and it's SWIFT. It's the SWIFT. That's how I knew about it.
Sure.
So if you get kicked out of the club, so to speak, the money trading club in U.S. dollars, then you aren't part of the cool kids and you can't trade commodities and do various business things that you need to do as a country if you're not a Swiftie.
Yes.
So to speak.
Yeah. So that's what the international sanctions are. And so we freeze them from using their money.
What year are we talking about here?
I think the SWIFT issue was in 2012. Well, shortly after that, 2013, 2014, China decides we are no longer going to continue buying new money going into essentially American bonds. Since 2014, there's been no net investment.
And this is really a very, very, very red letter event in the fact that this is kind of where the shit
because
show
they
started.
because you had the issue with Iran, and earlier there was an issue where Venezuela received the same sanction. Now, when Venezuela got shafted, nobody really cared. It was Venezuela. Even when Iran got shafted, nobody really cared. Iran, they've been causing problems for decades. But there are other countries that took note. Because when you're the world reserve currency, part of the deal is you won't weaponize the dollar. Weaponize means that you're not going to ban people from the plumbing.
And that's exactly what we did.
And so when we started confiscating other countries' money and banning them from the plumbing, well, naturally, other countries are going to look to say, how do we mitigate our risk?
Or better our position.
And so China said, you know what, instead of
and we're talking what China
about 2014.
2014.
2013,
China
2014.
Says,
so they're saying, you know what, we're not going to keep putting money into the American system because we don't trust the ledger. And this is where they start the Belt and Road Initiative, where they started taking all their money, because at the end of the year, they have enormous surpluses. Like last year, China had $1.2 trillion in surplus from their trade.
As much as we're $40 trillion in debt,
They're in the green every year.
Yeah, and a lot.
And so all those, over the years, it's hundreds of billions, and now it's over $1 trillion at their surplus. Well, that money's no longer coming to our system. They're taking that money under the Belt and Road Initiative, and they're going around buying assets.
That's called the Belt and
Road Initiative. So what they're buying is ports in Greece, ports in Peru, copper mines in
Africa.
And it doesn't matter, anywhere. Exactly.
Anything but American.
Anything but American paper. They want real world assets.
But now, I did see a graph where they're one of the largest landowners of agricultural land in America.
Sure, but that's because they bought. They were taking them. That doesn't mean they don't want to put the money in capital markets.
They don't want our bonds.
But
they'll go out buy 5,000 acres in Montana all day.
All day.
Because that's something tangible.
That's tangible. That's right. That's exactly correct. And so now they by doing that, they took the money out of our piggy bank. Well, when China started the Belt and Road Initiative, a couple years later, they started their own 2016 version of SWIFT. It's CIPS is the acronym. Now, initially, it was very small because everybody's transacting in dollars.
And again, this is important because this is leading up to where we are today. We're setting the foundation of why we're in a shitstorm with Iran.
Because China is generally recognized the leader of a collection of countries called BRICS, BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These are countries that are part of what's referred to as the Global South. And they are on their being a member of the U.S. dollar-led financial order doesn't work to their advantage. Now, if they're the only
are all those countries not recognizing the U.S. dollar in trade?
Of course, they certainly do. Those are all countries that are concerned that if the U.S. has the authority to confiscate money and kick people out of the plumbing, well, what's to stop them from doing it to them?
And some pretty powerful countries you mentioned.
Very powerful. And so the 55 to 60% of the world population are in BRICS nations, including the fastest growing economies: India, Brazil, China. And so the trajectory isn't good for the American system. Now, at this point, the Chinese parallel system, a new architecture they were creating, ran parallel with ours. Small. But they were able to hit a couple of key pillars to build it on. Venezuela couldn't transact in dollars. Iran couldn't transact in dollars. So China said, you know what? We'll buy your oil in our currency. Venezuela and Iran. The reason why Venezuela and Iran were attacked this year.
And we did it to ourselves. We did it to ourselves.
By kicking them out, at the time, there wasn't the alternative. China found the workaround and said, we're going to build an alternative architecture based on Venezuela, because they're both sanctioned, Venezuela and Iran. You guys can't sell your oil. You can't trust the Americans not to confiscate your money. You can't use their plumbing. No problem. We got ours over here. And so they start building their architecture on top of Venezuela and Iran. In 2018, Trump tears up the agreement with Iran. More importantly, Trump initiates a trade war with China. Now, from the time of Nixon until that trade war in 2018, the Chinese and American economies were integrated. They were the factory.
Yep.
We send you our dollars, you send us the cheap goods we need.
They were the manufacturers.
Well, when Trump hit them with the tariffs in 2018, they weren't ready. They got sucker punched. They had to take the punch. At that point, they knew we can't trust the Americans. And so now they agreed they're going to buy all these extra soybeans. Because remember, they hit them with the tariffs in 2018, and they put export controls restricting their access to the more sophisticated computer chips and trying to cripple their economy by prohibiting their big tech companies from gaining any more traction, like Huawei. They tried to ban these companies.
Why do we do that, Pete? Why do we fuck with them?
Because, first of all, with respect to the export controls, we don't want them, remember, being a part of BRICS and the leader of the global south, we don't want their tech to become the default standard in the world. We want our tech to be that standard. We can't compete with them on price. So we ban them. Same situation we're going to discuss is with AI. You're going to see in a little bit. But at that point, we're like, okay, we're going to strangle their tech industry. We want you guys making tennis shoes and T-shirts. Like, stay in your place. You're getting a little too uppity. And so China enters into an agreement where they agree to buy all these soybeans. Of course, they reneged. But to get out from underneath the train wreck, because they weren't ready for the fight, they said, okay, we'll appease Trump. We'll buy the soybeans, and we'll just deal with the export controls, and we remain friends. At that point, that's when the engineers in China said, we cannot trust the Americans. If they hit us with export controls on computer chips, what's to stop them from hitting us with export controls on pharmaceuticals or cars or chemicals or minerals or oil? We have to completely insulate the Chinese economy from the threat of American sanctions. And they did something that's extraordinary because at the time, in Chinese culture, although there's a lot of gambling going on in Chinese culture, what they invest in primarily is real estate. And so there was a lot of speculation going on. You heard about the big real estate boom in China that ultimately collapsed. Well, here in the United States, we viewed it as, they're having their '08 great financial crisis, their housing bubble. This is after 18, when we hit them with the sucker punch. That's not what happened. The Chinese government ordered the banks stop financing the real estate industry. The president of China came out and said, housing is for living, no speculation. You're not going to buy 2, 3, 4 houses and flip them. The flipping's over with.
That's the socialistic.
All the companies that are
That's
involved
what Madami's trying to do in New York to a
he
smaller scale.
He doesn't have the authority.
Right. But he's tried.
Well, I think he's tried to raise additional taxes through out-of-state residents maintaining properties. But with respect, this guy ordered the bank.
Right. That's the government, the socialistic, communistic government saying, we are going to control what you own.
You are directed to take all that money from the real estate industry and invest it in a manner consistent with our new industrial policy. We have to build cars, jets, chemicals, medicine, biotech, computer chips across the board. So they deliberately tank their economy. It'd be like the president today saying, you know what, crash the S&P by 60%. Take all that money and put it into this policy. It's essentially a war footing. We mistook it as they're having a housing bubble and it popped. In reality, the engineers
self-inflicted
were reallocating that money
to gear up.
They've been waiting for this fight since 18.
Yeah. So, I mean, Pete, I know we got a long way to go yet, but just if I could interject, it sounds like we're stupid.
No, you have individuals.
No, but I'm just saying, like, our leaders, whoever they may or may not be, we got caught sleeping. We didn't keep our eye on the ball.
Mr. Obama was a lawyer. Right? It's like all these, nobody expects, whether you take Trump, take Biden, take Obama, take Clinton, these are all very intelligent men, very successful. They achieved a level of success most Americans can't achieve in 5 fucking lifetimes.
Absolutely.
Put them behind the control of a 747 in mid-flight. What happens? Plane crashes. They are not competent to operate that aircraft. Nobody voted for any of our presidents thinking that they were airline pilots. Mr. Trump is not an expert in macroeconomics, nor geopolitics, nor military strategy. He's an extraordinarily successful politician, an extraordinarily successful real estate developer, a somewhat dubious casino operator, and a very successful reality TV show producer. So if he tells you, hey, this would be a great spot for a golf course, listen to that man. If he tells you we can refurbish this building and turn it into, listen to that man. But for him to be able to make fully informed decisions, any of our presidents to be able to make fully informed decisions, they need to have advisors that advise them in areas that they're not well familiar with. And in this particular circumstance, he's listening to individuals who constantly underestimate the adversary. Their level of intelligence, although high, isn't relevant to the nature of the adversary you're facing, whether it's the illiterate goat herder in Afghanistan or the engineering nerd in China or Iran. And because they're underestimating their adversary, and because the guys that go to Harvard and Yale are so intelligent, they have hubris. I've known several of these guys. I've had a number of people I've known fairly well, one of whom I got to know very well. One of my main tutors in macroeconomics was a very successful Wall Street guy, ran billion-dollar funds, Goldman Sachs executive, the whole pedigree. Well, he was from Harvard. He made sure to let you know he went to Harvard. Every one of the other guys I knew from Harvard, they're, look, super smart, not a lick of sense. And when you have men like this advising the president, it's not that the president is making bad decisions. It's he can't evaluate his options correctly because he doesn't realize what the engineer is going to do. Because the lawyer doesn't even contemplate the possibility that maybe the illiterate goat herder is smarter. At least smarter when it comes to fighting in the mountains.
And the lawyer is the furthest thing from an engineer.
And the lawyer is the furthest thing from the engineer because when the Iranian leadership calls in their Iranian nerds, they said, how do we defend? Under the mountains, in the mountains. Also, we're going to break up the governmentship. More importantly,
now you say there's 31.
31 of them. Identify the single points of failure. Because the single point of failure is the point that you apply your pressure on that can cause the entire structure to collapse. Well, our president wasn't told you've got 3 single points of failure, 2 of which are irreversible.
What are they?
Let's finish our discussion about the importance of the petrodollar and the recycling. Okay, but
and then how we got into Venezuela.
Yeah, China gets hit with the sucker punch in 18. They start preparing for the next conflict. You had massive cash infusion into all of these industries to be able to insulate the country because they knew if they sucker punched us the first time, we got to be ready the second time. In 2022, you have a circumstance where Russia and Ukraine go to war. Well, in response to that, the United States, working in conjunction with our vassals in Europe, decide, you know what? We're going to seize Russian assets. And we're going to kick them out of SWIFT. Now, at that point, even the countries that previously...
This would have been under Biden.
It was under Biden, yeah. Another heck of a job, Brownie. That was a disaster. A disaster. Terrible decision. Because every country now they're willing to overlook Venezuela. Troublemakers, Hugo Chavez. They're willing to overlook Iran. Crazy mullahs. They're not going to do that to us. Well, when you confiscate Russia's money, seize their money, freeze their assets, sanction them.
You start fucking with them.
They have the largest nuclear stockpile on the planet. If you're going to fuck Russia out of their money, and we took $300 billion.
We did?
Yeah.
In 2022?
Yeah, we froze $300 billion of their money and kicked them out of SWIFT and then put sanctions on their oil industry.
Who did this? Biden.
My heck of a job, Biden.
Oh, my God. Why would you fuck with them?
Because we were trying to force them
to succumb to Ukraine.
To get out of Ukraine. They were going to crush the ruble, they said. Once we stole, we call it freezing, sanctioning. We got these nice words for it. The rest of the world says you stole the fucking money.
Right. You stole $300 billion.
$300 billion. If you're going to steal $300 billion from the country with the largest nuclear stockpile, you'll take anybody's money. No other responsible government is going to put all their eggs in the American Treasury.
From that point forward.
Of course not.
Well, it's been a buildup.
It's been a cumulative buildup.
12, 14.
Yeah, but I mean, now you had an acceleration.
Yeah. And it's under different leadership, too. You can't blame it all on one person. You go to
both sides.
Obama, you go to Trump.
George W. Bush.
You go to George
Obama,
W.
Right across the board.
Yeah, I mean it's
That's right.
both parties,
But there is no difference between the parties at this level.
right? At this level of fuckery,
This is managing the American empire.
or destroying it.
No, but that's not the intention.
Well, I understand that,
But
that's where we're at.
That's why we're as fragile as we are. So you started seeing a massive movement from foreign central banks begin to stockpile gold. That's why you had this massive appreciation in the price of gold. It went from $1,500 an ounce to earlier this year, $5,500 an ounce.
Yeah, it's still trading high.
Still high. Why? Because people are like,
well, I asked you
all that money that's going into that went into gold should have been going into treasuries. And so, with respect to Russia, it becomes key because the confiscation of their assets was essentially the straw that broke the camel's back. At that point, you had the big migration into gold. Now, to understand the Russia scenario, because Russia is one of the fronts, because this year you've had military action, decapitation strike in Venezuela, captured their president, American missiles flying into Iran. Well, those are American missiles flying into Russia. We provide the weapons to Ukraine. Whether they come directly from us or we sell them to the Europeans, it doesn't matter. Those are American weapons. Those aren't Ukrainians operating. Those are American civilian contractors.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
You have to have people that are trained in those systems. They're not uniformed military American personnel. They're ex-military. So these are private civilian contractors. Or CIA black op type guys.
Over in Ukraine.
Yeah. So you've got Americans firing missiles into Russia, Americans firing missiles into Iran, and decapitating Venezuela. Now, why did Russia become part of this trifecta? Because after we seized their money, took their $300 billion, well, Russia is an enormous commodity producer and oil and all other commodities. Well, they were now on the same sanctions list with Iran and Venezuela. So then they became the third pillar of the Chinese alternate financial architecture.
The CIPS and
so
the
BRICS,
right?
So you had Venezuela, Iran, and Russia forming the base for China.
Of this new financial instrument that China has.
Yes, because it's essentially a Yuan petrodollar. But take out the dollar. It's Yuan gold. So you had now a competitor because so long as everybody needs oil, so China's going to be able to buy oil from Russia, Venezuela, and Iran, pay for it in Chinese currency. And because they're sanctioned countries, they're buying them at a deep discount.
And so at that point, we have to take out as many of these places as we can. That puts
initially we had to take out China. That's the linchpin.
But that's what we did in 2018, correct?
We sucker punched them in 2018. After 2022, they had Russia, Venezuela, and Iran on Team China. And if you've got...
And Venezuela.
Yes, and those are three of the world's largest producers.
You got Venezuela,
Iran,
and
Russia.
Russia, all buying their oil in the Chinese...
All selling the oil to China.
All selling oil to China. Trading oil and whatever in the new Chinese yuan-backed currency for their financial architecture, which was they created the gold standard again because people don't want to hold yuan. So what China said we're going to go back to the gold standard.
So they said we're going to establish gold, essentially vaults in all the big hubs. So they got one in London, Singapore, Hong Kong,
owned by China,
Saudi Arabia, owned by China, and your gold, so if Russia takes payment in yuan and they don't want to hold the Chinese currency, they'll just say, give it to us in gold. So they'll net settle in gold.
And by the way, they're the only country that can do that has their own currency, meaning there's only two currencies really realistically in the world we're talking about, the U.S. dollar and the new Chinese instrument. And China can back theirs with gold and we can't.
We cannot at this point. Unless we were to massively inflate the value of the gold, but then you're massively inflating the value of China. We can't even
get an accounting as what is. We can't even see if we have the 8,000 tons that we're supposed to have.
Back to 2022.
We just screwed Russia out of $300 million.
$300 billion, because remember, Russia invades Ukraine. Now, what people they gloss over the fact is that when the Soviet Union collapsed. The former Soviet states all returned back to their own countries, essentially. Well, Russia, for the next decade, was just being exploited, to be charitable, by Western powers. It just essentially raped the country.
So you're talking about like the late 80s, early 90s?
Throughout the 1990s, the cowboy era of capitalism, where American and Western-backed financial interests were snapping up Russian assets for pennies on the dollar. Enormous windfall. And that all came to an end when Vladimir Putin became president.
Which was what, 99?
Something like that,
99,
yes.
yeah.
And so that's where
Putin was a game changer.
it was a game changer. Because after he got on his feet, he started restricting those kind of maneuvers. He brought in the oligarchs who formerly were just gangsters. Now they gave them a nice term, oligarchs, and said, look, you made your money. From now on, you're going to conduct yourself in a manner consistent with Russian national security interests. So at the time, the world's richest man was a guy named Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He wanted the buck. Putin snapped him up, threw him right in prison.
Really?
Yeah.
So it would be equivalent to our Elon Musk, the world's richest
Snatched the guy
man.
right up, put him right in jail.
For what?
Hey,
You're just not working with me.
Yeah, well, you have money laundering, or there's financial improprieties, and so they broke up his company.
He probably didn't want that powerful of a guy rolling around his country, correct?
Well, powerful of that, he had an international platform, enormous wealth, and essentially collaborating with Western financial internationalist interests. It's like, hey, we're not going that route. You were told not to do it. You did it. You get snapped up. Other guys that started bucking a little bit, well, you had a whole series of individuals. This guy fell out of his hotel suite. This guy's airplane just happened to crash. Okay. This guy's car, the brakes went out. Well, after a few of these incidents.
After a handful of those, the other boys be like, okay.
Yeah, Vladimir, no problem, sir.
Whatever you need, bud.
Whatever you need. And so from that point forward, you had the Western powers breaking the agreement we had with Russia, with Gorbachev in particular, that we weren't going to expand NATO past Germany if they allowed for reunification. Well, in 2004, we double-crossed them. And
again, back to what I said. We're just a bunch of dicks.
Yeah. So we
double-crossing, gut-punching dicks.
And so they brought in, the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, these little rat-ass countries. Just a provocation. Did it because we could.
Just to fuck with them.
And they were being told, like, there's people that were, like, at the State Department. I forgot the guy's name, but he's sending, like, memos saying, look, this is a disaster at some point. It's going to come back to bite us in the ass.
It's under Clinton.
And so then, well, that was when the plan was put into place. In 1997, they created this plan where they were essentially going to, this is as the liberal hegemonic order was being sold. We won the Cold War. We're going to turn everybody into little baby America with our form of democracy. And so...
And Russia's broke up.
And the Soviet Union is broke up. And Russia was this huge prize. And then we lost access to it. And so from the early 2000s, there's been a plan in place to break up Russia. Russia is a huge country geographically, and it's actually different ethnic groups. So you've got, maybe you had the situation in Chechnya, but they were trying to incentivize the fracturing of Russia because, and in fact, the European Union leaders have said, if we can break it up into, 10 different countries, we'll be rich. And so Russia knows that it's been the plan of the West to destabilize the regime to ultimately lead to its collapse. So either we put in another leader who was the other guy, Yeltsin, a sock puppet essentially. We let him just sold everything to the U.S. at pennies on the dollars.
Oh, so Yeltsin was
But yeah, he was
before Putin.
He of course.
In between Gorbachev
and Putin was the guy Yeltsin, and
he was a U.S. yes man.
Just let us do whatever we wanted. The American financial interests were enormous financial windfalls. Well, that piggy bank got taken from us with Putin. So now the West has been conspiring. Well, how are we going to either get rid of Putin and put in another sock puppet, which is essentially regime change, or
Which is why we're probably backing Ukraine.
we're about to get to that, or we're going to break up Russia. And so we did the 2004 expansion. Then George W. Bush says we're going to include Georgia, the state of Georgia, not our state, their state,
Country.
the country of Georgia, and Ukraine. You're on an irreversible path to NATO membership. Russia says, we're not playing that game.
This is 04.
This is now 08. They
08.
invade Georgia. They break the country in half. They take this land, they take that. This is ours. And so now that
So they divide Georgia, take half.
they
and
take
give
the
half.
Russian, because, Georgia has enclaves that are predominantly Russian. Ukraine in the east,
Almost all Russian.
almost all Russian.
Right.
Odessa is a Russian city. And so as the powers in these countries started distancing themselves from Russia, they started taking these really antagonistic positions. You're not going to be able to teach kids in Russian language. They have to use our language. They have to do. They were trying to extinguish the cultural ties. Well, there was an election in Ukraine, and the person that won had promised neutrality. Well, in 2014, throughout the 2000s, the U.S. engaged in a practice of regime change without military action. They called them color revolutions. So you would have...
And how many countries did we do this?
On a handful of them. And so they would have essentially the NGOs, like the non-government organizations, come in, and this is all part of what Trump euphemistically refers to as the deep state apparatus, where they go in, they're the charities, we're going to do this, and we're going to mobilize democracy, and to get all this, but they're just essentially troublemakers from the other country's perspective who are agitating
For regime change.
And
And
so
had a high success rate at it?
they were able to knock off a few of them, and
Of the Eastern Bloc
of the
countries?
Eastern Bloc
Right.
countries, and they did it in Ukraine.
Was that how Zelensky became in power?
No, so in 2014, the democratically elected Ukrainian president,
The ones the
that
Ukrainians
promised,
put in there.
the one who promised neutrality, gets ran out of the country in an American-led color revolution. Of course, we're supposed to be hands off, but now the internal documents. This is where like WikiLeaks really pisses people off, because they started releasing like, oh yeah, this whole thing was all American backed. And so you had a concerted effort by the American government to topple the Ukrainian regime so that we can install a sock puppet who allowed us to begin building the Ukrainian military into the largest military in Europe. The Ukrainian military was sponsored and provisioned by the American government. Well, Russia has their seaport in Crimea. And so when the Russians saw what was going on, they didn't fall for the color revolution. This is a spontaneous revolt by the people of Ukraine yearning for freedom. Like, no. The fucking Americans are behind this bullshit. Okay, you want to play that game? They invade Ukraine and they take Crimea. They have to secure that territory because that's their access to the Black Sea.
And that's before the Ukrainian invasion that we all know.
Well, yeah.
This was prior.
Yes, of course. So now in 2000,
people don't even know about that for the most part.
In 2014,
They go get Crimea.
So we're building up. And of course, there is a reality that exists independent of people's delusions. If China says we're going to build bases in Tijuana, the U.S. invades. We will not allow China to build bases in Mexico. And so as we're building up the military apparatus in Ukraine, and European leaders are talking a little bit loose, like, hey, we're going to bring them into NATO. We don't care what Russia has. It's a sovereign country. They have the right to make their own decision. He's like, no, you don't have the right to make their own decision. The U.S. wouldn't accept China putting a base in Mexico. We're not going to accept this. So then Russia invades. Now, of course, we turned it into Russia's invading the country because they're going to...
The invasion that we know of.
That's how it's sold to our public. They invaded because they're imperialistic and they're taking over Europe. They're not taking over. They're just taking the Russian parts of Ukraine. But the Russian parts of Ukraine, first of all, are on the eastern side. It's going to be a big buffer geographically. But more importantly, it's the industrial capital. It's the rich farmland, the rich industrial sector. It's a lot of the mining interests. And it's got Odessa and the port.
And it's been going on for how long now?
Now it's been going on for 4 years. So they invade, we take the money,
$300 billion.
the $300 billion, and sanction them. They have no one to sell their money, their oil to, because they can't access dollars. They can't go through SWIFT. So what do? They join Team China.
The new China instrument, the new financial instrument.
Russia jumps into the pot. Now you got a three-legged stool: Venezuela, Iran, and Russia that formed a basis for China's alternate architecture. So now this war is going on.
Russia's now part of your financial
for
deal.
China, but the American government is being very generous in their support
of Ukraine.
Yes. And this is part of the problem that Trump actually finds himself in now, because we literally provided them hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment. Now, a lot of it was older stuff. We cleaned out the pantry essentially, but they were also getting some very sophisticated equipment also. And so for the first 2 years, you've got the war going on between Ukraine and Russia. And keep in mind, when Russia invaded, a month later, there was an agreement that was put on the table. Like they said, look, we'll leave. You just guarantee us neutrality.
So Russia, what people don't know, we never heard this.
It's called the Minsk Agreement. They had an agreement. In theory, both sides agreed. So now our sock puppet, this is Zelensky. He goes and talks to Biden, and he talks to Boris Johnson, the British PM. And they say, turn down the deal.
Hold on. So Biden and Boris, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, they
encouraged Zelensky turn down the deal, which would have left Ukraine.
Perfect.
Just stay neutral. No NATO.
Right. No NATO. You can get your land back.
Yeah.
We won't take it. Sign a deal. It's called the Minsk.
He agreed it. In principle, they had already agreed to it. He just needed to run it by his
boys,
his handlers, essentially. Well, the sock puppet gets told, nope, don't do it. We'll support you. So, like the Americans and the British were willing to fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian.
Yeah. I mean, if you think,
And so we start pumping in all this money, all this equipment.
Britain helping?
They do a lot of the financial machinations.
Ukraine could have been out clean.
At 1 month into it, there was a deal to settle the war. Ukraine walked away from it.
Now, does Putin know that we're the bad guys in the woodpile? I mean, absolutely does.
Yeah. And so we start pumping in all this equipment. And now for the first 2 years, we're supplying the Ukrainians with the arms and the weapons necessary to unalive Russians in Ukraine. Of course, the Russians aren't happy about it, but, we're on Team Ukraine. Ukraine's our proxy. Like, Ukraine is essentially a vassal of Western economic internationalist interests. Putin knows this. And he's not making an issue out of the fact that we're supplying the Ukrainians with weapons to fight Russians in Ukraine. Where things take a turn, another calamitous decision by Biden. And believe me, there's plenty of calamitous decisions by Trump also, but Biden's was particularly bad.
So 22's bad. We're taking assets, $300 billion. Now what's 24? What do you got for me in 24, Pete?
They finally start supplying the Ukrainians with long-range missiles to shoot missiles into Russia.
That's what we come up with in 24.
Yeah, because at this point, things aren't going good. Now, they're selling it. The Ukrainians are fighting, and they're doing a great job, and we got the Russians on the ropes. No, it's getting bad. Ukraine's about to get crushed right now. Don't pay any attention to the spin you're hearing on television. It's all bullshit.
As of this podcast right now, Ukraine's in trouble.
They're at the point now where they're about to lose Odessa. So with respect to 24, we start arming the Ukrainians with missiles to launch into Russia. That's an entirely different kettle of fish. It's one thing to arm them with weapons to attack Russians in Ukraine.
In their own land.
You are giving them the capacity, and keep in mind, the Russians know those aren't Ukrainians operating the systems. Those are American civilian contractors.
Those are Raytheon. Those
are former military guys working for, the equivalent of a Blackwater type.
With U.S. produced missiles.
Yes. And being sent there to operate the equipment for the Ukrainians. So you've got American civilians, former military, civilian contractors, CIA type contractors, so they can maintain the fiction that they're not American government, firing American weapons into Russia.
Not fighting them on your own soil anymore.
Yes. So that's when the Russian foreign minister, a guy named Lavrov, told the Americans, we reserve the right to respond at a time and place of our choosing. Effectively, what he was saying is, it's not going to be today. It's not going to be tomorrow. But rest assured, at some point,
You got one coming.
you got one coming.
Just like the old school on the streets when you got one coming,
You
right?
got one coming.
Or like you probably know this way more than me, but like, you do a guy a solid and you got one favor.
Yeah, you're on the hook.
You got, so
Yeah,
you do
got
a guy
that
a
coming.
solid, you got a guy a solid, and then you go cash that chip in when you need that
Yeah.
chip, right? But it's a big chip, but the guy knows you got one coming.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so that was the second horrific decision by Biden. So when Trump takes office in January 25, remember he wins the election in 24,
Yep.
he inherits the circumstance where Americans are firing missiles into Russia.
He inherits all this.
He inherits this. Like, now, like I said, there's going to be decisions that are obviously questionable on his end,
Sure.
just like I'm sure Biden's was. Like, don't get me wrong. It's Biden having his guys with Harvard MBAs.
And Biden inherited a little bit of a shit show. And Trump's inherited a shit. They all inherit
Because
shit shows.
it's all part of the same
Intellect.
American empire operation, constant expansion. Because you understand, when you have an enormous, and this is where we're at in January 25, Trump comes into office, we've at that point, $36 trillion in debt. He's got a plan. Because for the first time the year before, the amount of money spent on defense is trumped by the amount of money paid on national debt. Also, he's got $8 to $10 trillion to refinance worth of debt at a much higher interest rate than what it was originally issued in. And so it becomes an issue because you've got this enormous debt load. You can't afford to refinance $10 trillion at 4%. So he was scrambling to get the interest rates lowered. That's why he wanted to fire the Powell from the Fed. He wanted to fire Miss Cook from the Fed. And so that was all part of his machinations. They wanted to reduce spending. They were going to come in and Doge. Cut $2 trillion. Now, keep in mind, none of it worked.
No, none of it.
But the fact that it didn't work isn't what's important. By identifying what they were doing on the front end, it eliminates hindsight, and now you can draw inferences from what their plan had to have been. They were going to reduce spending. They were also going to cut taxes with the big, beautiful bill. But they were going to reduce spending with Doge. And they were going to restructure the Fed so that they can lower interest rates so that we can finance all this debt. Most importantly,
sounds good in principle.
Oh yeah, of course. No. Look, I'm not faulting the plan.
The plan.
It just couldn't work. First of all, with respect to Doge, it failed miserably. The big beautiful bill results in massive tax revenue shrinkage. But they didn't cut the spending. So if you cut taxes without cutting the spending, now you got a $2 trillion deficit. So you're accelerating the amount of bonds you need to issue. But you can't issue more bonds on top of the bonds you already have to issue to pay for the previous bonds. Now you're paying for this month's rent with this credit card. And then next month, you got to pay with this month's credit card.
Robin Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, it just becomes this huge.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, it's a huge, highly financialized, essentially a Ponzi.
All right.
And it works, except for the fact that you have a lot of people now, particularly foreign central banks, taking tremendous amount of money, moving the money into gold. You have other countries trading with China in their currency, including Russia, Venezuela, and Iran. And so when Trump comes into office, they say, look, and remember, they came in hard.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of piss and vinegar coming out of these guys.
A lot of piss and vinegar.
Okay, and so what they said is, okay, we're going to put the world on notice. We're going to redo a new tariff regime. And he makes a threat to BRICS.
BRICS is not, in my opinion, not a serious threat. But what they're trying to do is destroy the dollar so that another country can take over and be the standard. And we're not going to lose the standard.
Now, as you just heard Mr. Trump say, allowing BRICS to form an alternative currency or using China's currency as a BRICS currency would be the equivalent of us losing a war. Not a little war, catastrophic World War II level type war. It would destroy the American economy. Our way of life would be crippled. And so as an American, like, look, if you're going to maintain an operation of this nature, there are men who are going to have to do the dirty work. If you want to maintain the American standard of living, like, we're not naive children. Like, if for us to be able to do this, you're going to have the sock puppets. And you're going to have maybe the brakes on some guy's car go out every once in a while.
And that would be talking about
There's
other world leaders that aren't,
or whoever's
who's not in line,
who's not playing ball
with what we're trying to.
Yes.
What we're trying to.
What we need to maintain.
Reinstall the U.S. dollar compared to the BRICS system.
Well, because we had to strangle that. Because up until 25, we were playing the nice guy and we'll help you out, and we're, the liberal hegemony and the rules-based order, and we're spreading democracy. Trump came in and said, look, we're done with that bullshit. This is essentially mafia-style coercion. You are not going to be involved
with BRICS.
With BRICS. In fact, that's what he said. It's just said in the video. I will put 100% tariffs on any country that joins that to attack our dollar. Now, this is before what happens with the Liberation Day. But at this point, that threat carried a lot of weight. And so that's how he viewed it. And that, quite frankly, they're 100% correct. That is an existential threat to the American economy and our way of life as we understand it. So you can't fault them for wanting to do what they did. Now, I've got a lot of friends, particularly in Los Angeles, who are on the, they're liberals or tend to be more on the left side, and they're like, it's not right. Well, look, we're not talking about right or wrong.
We're talking about survival at this point.
That's right. And when it comes to survival, there's going to be men, the guys in the black suits, who are going to make sure that no one decides to, get off the reservation. And so the plan that the administration did coming in, their goals were laudable. The people that put together the plans weren't competent to do so. And now it worked with almost everybody. Because when they came in, well, first things first, when Trump comes in, he makes all these threats. Independent of the tariff threats, they start targeting Mexico, Venezuela, and Panama.
Targeting and
threatening overtly. But they're threatening them because of drug trafficking. This is when Trump famously said that there's an intolerable alliance between the Mexican government and the drug cartels. 100% correct. It's an incomplete statement. It's more between the political parties in Mexico and the drug cartels. But nevertheless, the primary beneficiary of the drug trade in Mexico for the past 50 years have been the Mexican political class. But that's not something that they just found out.
That's been going on for 50 plus years.
They've been, the La Plaza system of criminal governance has been operating now for damn near 50 years.
And in our cartel segment, like you said, 50% off the top goes to the government.
That was the original arrangement with the network out of Guadalajara, yes. And so what Trump did is he's told the Mexican government, we are considering, one, we're going to start targeting the Mexican political class because we know you guys are fucking dirty. And two, we are considering unilateral military action on your soil, targeting cartels. They actually designated these guys the foreign T-word organizations. And so they're no longer criminals. They're now the equivalent of an Al-Qaeda. But I mean, they can take unilateral military action without
consent of the country.
Without the consent of the country.
They can roll up in there and grab a bit.
So now the Mexican government's on its back heels. So Ms. Scheinbaum said, well, what do we need to do? What can we do to help you guys? Well, let's come up with a plan. And what was the response? Put 50% tariffs on China. Prohibit BYD from making electric cars in your country. Renegotiate NAFTA in a manner consistent with how we want it to be negotiated. Like, you guys a problem? What's this got to do with
us?
Mexicans dealing cocaine?
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like, why you fucking with the cartel when you don't want the BYD, electric?
You're worried about fucking, because
you're worried about fucking electric cars.
Remember about the story from Vietnam you said?
Yeah.
Well, they were going to impose massive tariffs on China, but they didn't want China to come in through the back door, coming in through Mexico.
Like they would.
So they had to say, you are going to put 50% tariff on all goods coming in from China and these other restrictions.
Mexico didn't go for that, did they?
Of course they did.
One of Trump's first things
was to come in and demand, Mexico, you're going to change your policies.
Yeah.
Venezuela, you're narcos too. See,
And we
we're
know-
pissed
and-
off with Venezuela because they're one of the key pillars of
the financial.
the financial architecture for China.
Right.
So we start building a case about Maduro being involved in drug trafficking. He was the leader of.
We start showing us blowing up these little cigarette
they called it the
boats.
Cartel de los Soles. It was the sun. Like, this is not fucking bullshit. Yes, there's a lot of drug trafficking in Venezuela, but it's a fraction of what it is in Mexico.
But you can sell anything down the river to American if you throw the cartel gimmick.
If you
on
got
it.
the cartel gimmick on.
It's like, oh yeah, they did it for the fucking cartel. You know, they really it's because of the financial instrument that China has established that Venezuela was playing ball with.
Yes, if you're
And
playing
we
footsies
had-
with China, you're going to have a problem. Because don't forget, Mexico was also having massive trade relations with China. And so we're about to screw the Chinese.
So we got Mexico in
We
line.
got to back out the back door from Mexico. Then we start focusing our attention on Venezuela. And third, we start focusing our attention on Panama. Because the Panamanians...
I didn't even know about the Panama gimmick.
Panama, I remember part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Well, China's port companies had received the long-term contracts to build and develop and run the ports in Panama. So Trump's going crazy. They're selling the Panama Canal to the Chinese. We built it. They didn't sell it to the Chinese. They let the Chinese operate the ports.
Lease them or whatever, you know.
So
or
now the
be
American
there.
government pressures the Panamanian government, and the Panamanian government breaks the contracts with China.
Because they're afraid of us.
Because of the Panamanians were being pressured.
Sure.
There's no way to... Because remember, Trump was talking about going back there and taking it. So we're unilaterally threatening to go into Panama to confiscate the canal. That's ours. We
Take it
built
back.
That's
Take it
what Trump
back.
was saying.
Even though we had a 99-year lease. And
So then they made
didn't
it...
Jimmy Carter break the lease or something
No,
like that?
the lease ended.
Oh, did it? But okay, so we got Mexico in line.
Mhm.
We got Panama in
So
line.
then Panama fucks the Chinese and takes away the operation of the canal, and now we have control.
Right.
Meanwhile, Mexico falls into line.
Falls in the line. Panama's in line.
Panama's in line. Mexico's in line. Now, and we're pressuring Venezuela.
Right, we're pressuring them, and if we don't get what we want, we take it.
Venezuela's got allegedly the largest proven oil reserves on the planet.
Sure.
Well, that's worth trillions of dollars.
You gotta have that.
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
and you certainly got to have them be traded in U.S. dollars.
That's the only thing that matters.
Right.
As long as you're within the U.S. dollar denominated financial order and you're not playing footsie with China, they don't care if you're a narco. But if you get off the reservation,
now we are.
Now you're going to have a Delta Force squad come see you.
And now we're going to use narco as
a pretext
to get in there.
To get in there.
Because everybody in America goes crazy over the cartel.
That's right.
Dumb cartel, and they let you do anything.
That's right.
The average person doesn't know, Pete, about the Panama or Mexican play.
Yeah.
We're familiar with Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
We're familiar with Iran. That's what we're talking about.
Well, because had Mexico not done that, then you would have had military personnel going in there under the pretext of targeting the cartel.
We're gonna get the cartel.
Mm-hmm.
And Mexico, at the end of the day, probably somewhat values their cartel.
Well, no, you have to understand, they have to maintain a balance.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, you just can't go out there and wipe out the cartel.
Mexico is the largest trading partner of the United States. And so the Mexican and American economies have been integrated since NAFTA. And so it's a relationship that we don't want to destroy. But on the other hand, Trump has been very successful in conveying the impression that he'll just do whatever, fuck international law. And so Mexico was intimidated. So the advisors for Trump, the Harvard MBAs, the Yale Law guys, their assessment of the Mexicans and the Europeans, and quite frankly, most countries, was correct. So then once you've got that early stuff in January, the next big event is April with Liberation Day. And on Liberation Day, you've got Trump standing in the middle of the Rose Garden with his big chart.
With his tariff chart.
That
was in April?
April 2nd. And then on top, at very first country, China.
If you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariff. So we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%.
So as you can see from the video, Trump was very proud of the Liberation Day tariff with respect to China.
He was like a kid in a candy store.
Now, understand, the purpose of the tariffs there were multiple purposes. Obviously, they wanted to reorient the financial order, like get people out of this China camp. They also wanted to balance these trade deficits. They wanted to establish some sense of balance. Now, of course, this is where their plan doesn't make sense. You have to run trade imbalances because what we send the world are worthless pieces of paper.
Yeah.
We're always going to have an imbalance. You can't have the world reserve currency and the manufacturing because then how are they going to get your paper to use for their monopoly money?
But Pete, doesn't he have dudes like you and even smarter?
No, because
that
the hell of a lot
walk him-
smarter than me.
Because
Of
they
course.
could walk him through him.
Well,
say,
I think it was.
"Is that-
That's why again, I think it's just a pretext to say, look, we're going to threaten you with tariffs to force you to give us concessions, as opposed to going through with it. It's just
so it was a negotiation
it's
tactic
essentially a bluff.
that failed.
Well, no, it worked with the overwhelming majority of the countries because they initiate the tariff. And Liberation Day, they announced it. You know, the weak bitches in Europe are falling over each other. Please, 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 let us get a meeting, sir. Let us get a meeting. We'll negotiate.
Canada.
Canada bucked. The Europeans caved. The British caved. Countries in Asia caved.
China.
China didn't cave. Remember, they've been waiting for this fight since 18.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not getting a sucker punch again.
Mm-mm.
We're ready this time.
You fucked us at 18. Goes back to the 18 fucking.
That's right. And so now, the boys who thought they had the leverage walked into a trap. Because the Chinese had their engineers being advised or advising their political class. How do we strangle the American economy and cripple them if they try this again? So when you had our guys going on TV and all the president's advisors were holding all the cards, like, you jackass. As soon as I heard that, I was like, you guys got no fucking street smarts. You're not holding the cards. They've got you by the balls and are about to break it off in your ass. And you have no idea what's coming.